This video made possible by the Global Innovation Exchange. Visit gixnetwork.org to learn more.
Awesome. Let's have a sibling rivalry discussion. Brent and Mark Frei.
Thank you very much.
Take it away. Thank you.
Hi. So this picture, that's our dad. And he's 81 years old today. This picture was a couple summers ago, so he's 80 in that picture. And we were, as a family, out in the field all picking rock, which is a thing that we do every year because it's important and it's tough, and for some reason we still do it by hand. But I remember looking up on the ridge, and there he was, and he was out in front of the tractor, and it was probably Mark driving in the air-conditioned comfort there. But he was throwing the rocks into the bucket, and we're taking him off the field, and it was kind of a seminal moment looking at it and thinking, my gosh, he's been doing that his whole life. With all the automation that's come into farming and all the technology, why is it we still do this? Even though we have lots of tools that are supposed to pick rocks, we still do it by hand. And it was actually that moment that was the beginning of the founding of TerraClear, though I didn't know it at the time. He's been my inspiration, and that was definitely the beginning of that. So if we go back 35 years, this is Mark and I, and Mom, who's sitting right here. She's in charge of the farm, so she gave herself the day off today. And it was really a 2.5-person job. Dad, 16 hours a day, and me the days I wasn't in school. And Mom was truck driver. She called herself chairman of the truck drivers. And that's Mark, and he's still about 4 years away from being able to operate heavy equipment. But it was, and you think I'm joking, but this was the team. This is what it took to farm about 800 acres. And this is Grangeville, Idaho, where we live, the Camas Prairie, the little square at the very top. That's about 160 acres. It's a homestead, and so those squares all add up to about 800 acres. That was a small to medium-sized farm. And it was just hard work and smarts and extra hours that made the money at that time.
Whoops. Fast forward to today. Forgive me if I have to refer to my cheat sheet. I'm used to talking to a herd of cows, and they don't care what you say as long as you feed them. So now, back when Brent was a kid, we farmed 800 acres. Now we farm 5,000. And also, our crew, in the midst of going to 5,000 acres, our crew hasn't really gotten that much larger. We've just gotten more efficient. And here you can see Dad and Kim on the ends and some nephews that help us during harvest time, and my two of my sons there. Every day on the farm is a bring your kid to work day. They love coming. In fact, there's usually a healthy discussion in the morning, which one of the 5 is going to come with me. You might ask yourself, okay, well, why did they have to go from 800 acres? And let me give you a little context. What's an acre? A football field is about 1.3 acres. So we farm nearly 5,000 football fields. And you might ask yourself, well, why did we need to go to this kind of scale? Well, consider this. Today, a bushel of wheat, and that's the unit that we usually use, and it's, to give you again some context, it would be like 9 milk jugs, 9-gallon milk jugs is a bushel of wheat. So that has a value today of $6. Back in 1900, wheat was $32 a bushel, inflation adjusted. So we operate at 20% of the value that you had 100 years ago for a bushel of wheat. So basically, we've had to get larger. We've had to increase to this scale to keep it profitable, plain and simple. Now, this is great for the consumer. This is bad for farmers. This has allowed the consumer to go from, in 1900, 43% of your income was used to buy food, to today, 9% of your income is used to buy food. One of the ways that we've gotten more efficient is mechanization. Building bigger, larger, faster. In the upper picture here, you have Brent driving the small red combine, probably a little crookedy and too slow. And you have Mom driving the truck, and Brent's unloading on Mom on the run. So the auger comes out and unloads, and Mom's driving alongside. It's like formation farming. And usually the combine is supposed to be able to go back and forth and adjust the load in the truck, but Mom would usually just keep the truck in the same place and couldn't get the load in different places. That was for you, Mom. Let me back up. So You have the harvest fleet 35 years ago, and now on the lower picture, you have the harvest fleet today. 3 large combines and a large bankout wagon. One of those combines on the bottom cuts 3 times the amount that the combine on top cuts. Here is our seeder and fertilizer. Again, we fertilize and seed probably 3 to 4 times what we used to. They used to be separate operations, seeding and fertilizing, and now this innovative tool does seeding and fertilizing at the same time. Also, that red tractor that you see has GPS guidance, auto steer, so I can create an AB line and lock in, and it drives itself with an accuracy of 4 inches to the other side of the field, and this saves us seed and fertilizer. Also, what we fertilize with here is a thing called anhydrous ammonia. What's anhydrous ammonia? Well, maybe some of you have an ammonia cleaning bottle in your house, or you've seen that for cleaning, and maybe you've opened the lid and gotten a whiff of it. Well, that's ammonia. Anhydrous just means without water. So we fertilize with ammonia without water. Back in the turn of the century, 1900s, Haber and Bosch invented nitrogen fixation. They figured out how to take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fix it into ammonia form. When you look at nature's way of putting nitrogen into the ground, primarily through nitrogen-fixing bacteria or lightning storms, that only fixes about 25 pounds of nitrogen in the soil per acre. And when you take that by all the arable land across the world, that only gives you enough N in the ground to have protein molecules to feed 4 billion people. So if it wasn't for the artificial infusion of nitrogen and anhydrous ammonia into the ground, this is what, in a very real way, allows us to have another 3.5 billion people on the planet. Here's an example of the application in farming of satellites, drones, and the infrared spectrum. The first picture you see there is an index of plant biomass from the infrared spectrum and nitrogen uptake above soil. This is one of our fields. The dark green shows you large biomass, good nitrogen uptake. The red is small biomass, poor nitrogen uptake. This basically correlates to our high production zones and our low production zones. The next picture there is a prescription map, or a shape file. This is loaded into the seeder, into the seeder's computer, and as the tractor drives across the field, it will automatically change its fertilizer rate and seed rate according to whether it's in the high production zone or the low production zone. Again, increasing that efficiency. Here is a yield map from our combine, our modern combines, not the ones that Brent knows how to drive. And this is kind of like our scorecard. The green zones are where the yield was better, and the orange zones where it was less. I love this picture. This is 3 huge combines in an ocean of wheat. However, underneath that picture is lurking a sinister problem. What's that sinister problem? Rocks. Rocks, thousands and thousands of rocks. Now, you can see here that you can see some green in the background. That's the canola coming up. And if you look really close around the rocks, you can see some little teeny canolas coming up. Now, we have an age-old problem. These have been with us since the beginning of time, and they stand in the way of production. Even with all of our technology and all of our modernization, the rocks will inhibit the seedlings from coming up. They will damage your implements. In fact, you can see that big one in front kind of has a scar across the front. Some farm implement went over top of that rock and left that scar. And also, if your combine comes along and picks up one of these rocks, you've pretty much done major, major damage to your combine. And so we need to solve this rock problem, which is even a bigger problem than it was years ago. Because when you think about when we farmed 800 acres and maybe 10% of that area had rocks, now we farm 5,000 acres, 10% of that area has rocks, and we don't really have a lot more people, and we don't have a better way of picking up the rocks. And a day or a half a day of downtime costs us 4 times as much productivity in seeding or harvesting as it did years ago. So what did we do to solve this age-old problem? We found out that, before we get to the solution, the industry has sought for a mechanical solution to this. Here you can see 6 examples, and I hate this slide because this represents about $300,000 of lost investment on the farm of trying to solve the rock problem but not getting there. Number one is a rock rake. It basically takes the rocks and it rakes them over into a row to make it easier to pick up, basically with number two, which is your classical rock picker. And we'll come back to that and how that works. And number three is a special bucket on the front of a front-end loader of a tractor made for rocks where the ground sifts through as you try to pick up the rock. Number four is a rock crusher. It's basically like a giant rototiller that's supposed to grind up the rocks and pulverize them into gravel. Turns out that it doesn't really work very well in soil because there's too much drag in the soil. And number five is kind of like a giant rolling pin where we just despair and push the rocks back into the ground so that the combines don't pick them up. And number six is primarily what we still do, which is just somebody out there by hand picking up the rock. That's my sister Kim there. So I'm going to show you a little video. Is that going to come on?
You got to do one more click.
One more click. So this was number two. This is a rock picker, which is basically kind of like a dustpan with fingers going through the ground and then something trying to sweep the rocks in. I want you to notice how slow it's going and also eventually the vastness of the field to get a sense of the problem that we face. Now, again, not all of it has rocks, but it's significant enough to inhibit production. And this is just one of the fields. So imagine if we have 5,000 acres and 5% of it has rocks, that's picking rocks on 200 football fields with his rocks as thick as that picture that I showed you earlier with that big rock with the scar on it. So with all this mechanization and all this technology that we have at farming, the age-old problem stands in the way of that productivity. And so the next year, we did solve our problem. Well, kind of in a farmer-type way. We outsourced it, and we found out that my brother Brent didn't have anything to do for 10 days.
So this is my happy little selfie on day one. I'm so excited. I think that I'm tough enough to go out and do all this manual labor after 25 years of sitting behind a desk. And by the end of this day, I was online looking for better tools for picking rock. There's got to be a tool out there that works. Turns out there wasn't. So by day three, I was looking for technology that I could use a laser or ultrasound or something to pulverize it in the field. Turns out that's not going to work because it's going to take too much energy. And it was at this point where, this was about day three, Mom took a picture of me coming home from work. I was, now instead of coming home from work at 8 or at 7 or at 6, I'm done at about 4:30. And this was the day I decided that there was technology that existed today through GPS and robotics and hydraulics and computer vision to be able to pick these rocks. It can be done. It could be done. It's a giant problem. Every farmer has it all the way around the world. There are huge rock walls in Ireland that will attest to that, and it could be solved. So I did what any normal person would do. I went home, started working with the Legos, and I put together some ideas. It was particularly hard because rocks are not real cooperative. There are different sizes, there are different shapes, there are different amounts of buried, there's lots of different types of soil that you're trying to dig them out of. But I had this idea, and so I was using this tool then to try to recruit a couple of the people that I have a lot of respect for. And so we're around the kitchen table, we have some butcher paper, we've got some toy tractors. I don't know why everyone's doing this, but apparently it's important when you're making decisions. Eventually, Vivek and Dwight and Mike and Thane, who's actually on FaceTime on an iPad every day from school, all put their thumbs on the table and said, "This can be a huge, a huge company. It can be a great problem to solve. We can do not just good, but make a really successful business." And so we set off. And we did what you would imagine, no idea is a bad idea. Dwight's an excellent artist, so he drew this. It was sort of the thoughts that we put together. Well, you think something could just drive along and use some arms and pick up some rocks. I don't know why there's a conveyor belt here. It's kind of unnecessary, but we gave Mike heck for his conveyor belt. And, but it didn't take very long to just determine that this wouldn't work. There was a minimum number of rocks we'd have to pick to be economic. We had to pick 400 an hour like one every 10 seconds. And all the forces that would be required and the difference in sizes didn't really work for this. And so we bailed on the early designs, and we thought, well, let's go and actually use some of the thinking that went into all of the tools that have been built for rocks in the past. So the finger idea that would be used to sift out the rocks out of dirt. But because we are really smart and we're technologists, we can actually use a computer to determine which fingers to use. And so we drew a whole bunch of ideas around how we'd have these independent fingers that would determine how big the rock was and only pick where the rock was. And then there was a lot of problems with what if the rock is too big, like a big iceberg below, and you were going to break these off as we're driving along. And so we had some other design ideas that would overcome those problems. And as we continued to design, they got more and more complicated. And as they got more and more complicated, the likelihood that they would work would go way down. And so we scrapped a lot of ideas. And eventually we went on a trip and to visit a company, and we started thinking about things that are used in timber. And we came up with the idea of using some rotary spindles with spikes on them to dislodge the rock. And there was some benefit in that because it could handle different types of dirt and different size rocks and so forth. We did some Dr. Seuss drawings. They were awesome. And there was a lot of dissension in our group that said this can't work. Thankfully, one of our guys, Chris, went and he just 3D printed up a trial, put it on some little motors and gave it a shot. And by golly, it worked pretty good. So we were off. But now that we got it out of the dirt, we had to somehow get it into the bucket. So we got some more super complicated design ideas, but ultimately thought, well, what if we put it on some paddles, like in a pinball machine, and as we got it out, we just flipped it into the bucket or into the trough, and that could work. So we tried that. We set it up on our little test bed outside, which is like a vegetable garden, and we gave that a try. I want you to notice that we have our hard hat on and safety glasses, and we've used duct tape, so you know we're legit. And our motors are not very tough, and the duct tape gets in the way, and so we can see that there's some problems with this. But in particular, the idea that the computer has to make decisions about how far the paddles go and when to flip them up, it wasn't going to work. But it was the seminal idea to get us to the next step, which was, what if we made that rotor the whole distance? So effectively, it was a track. And I have to warn you that there were some toys who lost their lives in this process as we disassembled them and put them together into some more complicated tools. And this ended up being the path to where we are today. And we're really excited about the design. Before I go, and we tested it lots, but before I go on, I want to note that so far it looks sort of idyllic. You know, we're going to start a company. We had some designs. But it's not like Smartsheet, where it's this beautiful office with all these tools and all these resources. Oh, by the way, you should all be using Smartsheet. And it's more like this. It's a double-wide trailer in a crack house that we converted into our office. We do all of our own conversion work. We go to places that don't actually have major airports to find our customers, to talk to them. We look at the implements that farmers use and understand why they're designed the way they are. We sit in living rooms with 300 plus years of farming experience and listen to why our ideas are crap and what's not going to work about them. We de-ice our own plane, and we pinky swear that we won't tell Dwight's wife that we did. And then, and we do a lot of whiteboards. We destroy a lot of toys. That's Dwight. And we have a lot of bad hair days. But we also get to work outside. We get to work outside in the field. Our test lab is outside. That's Bishop. He's got his feet up on the wall. He's coding. He's coding robotics there to hook up our hydraulics. And that became basically the design that we have today. We've got patent disclosures on all these ideas, and so I felt comfortable sharing with him. But the idea is that we can have a belted picker on the front of either the bucket of a tractor, so you see it's hooked onto the bucket of the tractor, or it can be on an autonomous vehicle. There's a camera that looks down and says, that's a rock. It directs the picker to the particular spot, stabs it, grabs it, and throws it into the bucket. So there's two important parts of our business. One is we'll fly a drone over your field, and this is that field that Mark showed you the picker running on, and that's the same, what we call a scab patch area. You can't farm, but has lots of big rocks in it. And so the drone is taking pictures. We send it through the computers. A neural net looks at those pictures, stitches them together, and then you can see it's making little red boxes around. It's doing it right now, all the rocks, and it's characterizing them. This one's big. This one's small. We're trying to determine like how many rocks are bigger than 9 inches, so we can tell, and we can create a plan. We can create a quote for a farmer, like what it will take to solve his whole problem or just his 9+ inch problem, and then we can go pick them. And this is on a large scale. Is it a problem? Absolutely. Not only do we live it, but all of our relatives live it. I got this text message from my cousin, and it says, we're eager for your rock picker to hit the market. There's 3 generations of people picking rocks. They've got a full truckload there, kids and grandpa and everyone working. So here's our test out in Bellevue in our vegetable garden. My sister will tell you this is not a real test because all the rocks are big and sitting on the surface, but we're gonna make lay-ins before we make our 3-point shots. And we don't have a tractor in this picture, but we do have some guys pushing. This is the camera looking down, saying that's a rock, and providing the telemetry and the targeting for the picker, saying that's a rock, and here's how we go get it. And then we have the actual picking. Now this is only a 5-horse motor powering this hydraulics. And is doing a pretty darn good job. We haven't optimized all of the angles and the tread design and so forth. Our 20-horse motor is actually launching those rocks over the fence behind us. But it's super exciting. So this is the fundamental sort of Frankenstein-oriented design. It hasn't been streamlined yet, but it's really exciting for us. And what I hope is that when we're up here talking to you next year and we're showing the actual tool on the field, that my dad is no longer picking rock, but instead he's enjoying the fruits of that, and he's looking at his big machine seeding rockless fields. Thank you.
So anyone have a question for Brent or Mark? Come on up. I will start. Brent, what has been the harder challenge, building Smartsheet, which went public recently, or building TerraClear? What's been the harder entrepreneurial challenge?
Smartsheet was much harder because nobody wants to talk about the 400th collaboration tool, but everybody wants to talk about this. No,
Rocks are sexy, huh?
They are, yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Come on up. Come on up, Ben.
After you've cleared a field once, why do you have to clear it again?
Good question. I meant to get to that in the presentation. So you'd think once you clear them all off, it's all done. Well, a lot of our soil is only 6 to 8 inches deep. So even though you clear all the rocks off the surface, the next time you go and you cultivate, or the next time you go and seed, and those shanks are down there 6 inches, they'll tip up the next rock because underneath there's a whole lot of rocks. And so they're constantly coming back to the surface. Believe me, it's the mystery of farming. We've all asked ourselves that question. How can there be more rocks here after I just picked them all?
You rattled off some kind of statistic earlier, I don't remember it exactly, about how many rocks per hour a machine would need to pick up to make it profitable. Do you have any ideas what that'll look like for your company?
How many?
How many rocks to make it, for a farmer, to make it worthwhile for them to use your services?
Good question. We think it's about 400 an hour. Now, it could be.
And this should be able to do that?
Oh, well, you just saw the demo there. It was doing them every 5 seconds.
It's hard to. That's very cool.
Yeah, so they come in all different situations out in the field. They can be very dense, and so you're picking them every few inches, or they could be pretty far apart, and so there's travel time to get to them. But on average, we're thinking 400, and that was in working with that group of farmers and others on the couch that were saying, well, you know, if I'm going to pay you for it, and it's got to be a rate at which an independent operator can make money doing it, including the cost of paying off the thing they just bought or rented. Then it's about 400 an hour.
And if I could jump in there too, Brent was using as a basis point the hand picking rate. right? So when we're 2 or 3 of us are out there in front of the tractor, how many rocks are we getting to the tractor? And so they got to at least match that or do better than that.
And just to clarify so I understand, are you going to be selling these tools to the farmers, or are you going to be going out as your company with the tools and, obviously you're going to be doing the drone part of it, et cetera, but how much of it will the farmer be able to do on their own? Are you going to eventually sell something, and maybe you don't know, but where they can have their own drone and use your software, et cetera, so that they can do it all themselves?
Well, the picker themselves, the one that would attach to the front of a tractor, it's likely they would buy that, or they and another farmer together would buy it. The picker hooked to an autonomous vehicle, which would be vastly more expensive and take a little more technical, training, that will probably be a service provider. Either us as a service or one of the local service providers that service ag.
I think you just answered my question, Brent. You're going to be offering rocks as a service?
Rocks as a service.
That's it. Thanks, Mark and Brent. I'd never thought about rocks as a service. RAS. You heard the first acronym here, not SAS, RAS. Mark.
Thank you.
Brent, thank you so much. That was fascinating stuff.